Hi there, and welcome to the stream. Hey there, Retro Vixen, thanks for lurking. So, today, because we do not have a traditional wave that has come out yet since our previous review of the Deadpool Sauron wave, we're going to be doing another pseudo wave like we did previously last week with the Walgreens wave. Welcome to the stream as well, Rhetoric. So, for this week, what we're going to be doing is instead of doing a traditional wave with a Build-A-Figure, we're going to be doing a wave that partially came out previously, partially has an exclusive 2-pack out right now, and has part of the figures where you can't even get them in stores normally. So, without further ado, let's begin our Netflix figures unboxing. Now, 4 of these figures did come out with the Man-Thing Build-A-Figure wave. 2 of them are an exclusive box set from a certain retailer who you will be told the name of during the stream when we get to that review. And 2 of them are recommended figures if you're a big fan of the Netflix shows, just to put with your other figures. But, without further ado, let's begin. To keep things kind of on a theme here, we'll actually start off with a review of the only nemesis that we have seen thus far from Netflix, which is the Netflix Elektra figure. As we see, it once again has the window pane on the front and the blurb on the back, and as I said previously, is part of the Man-Thing Build-A-Figure wave. Inside of the box, we have a kind of interesting deco on the back here. It looks like a cityscape, which is very appropriate for Elektra and for the other Netflix heroes. Inside, we have Elektra herself, along with a set of size and an extra unmasked Elektra face. So, getting into the figure herself. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm actually a huge fan of what they've been doing with the Netflix series, and additionally what they've been doing with these figures. They haven't been giving us fantastical costumes like we would see in the comic books. What they're giving us instead is very human costumes. So, things you would see people like you and I wearing out on the street. That makes me very happy. Plainclothes heroes are actually a big thing of mine. I'm a huge fan of unmasked heads that come with figures or can be purchased in the aftermarket, along with figures of people that are in very plainclothes outfits. So, to begin the review of our Elektra figure. As you can see, she is packaged with the masked face on. However, that is all of her downward neck articulation that you're going to get. Right about to there. Her upward neck articulation is hindered slightly by her ponytail here, but you can get a decent amount back. For her arms, for her arms. That is as far up as they're going to go. You can get to just about the 90-degree angle. Something I would have preferred a much greater angle for of someone who's a martial arts master. Additionally, as we say all the time here, Hasbro, fix this. I shouldn't be able to do more downward like that. That's how you break an arm. Than I can this way. Because all of the female figures that Hasbro's been making do not have a bicep swivel and are only single-jointed elbows. You guys really need to fix this. I'm sounding like a broken record here. I know the people on my stream are probably tired of hearing it. I'm tired of saying it. For her hand articulation, she only does the in-out articulation, which seems like a waste for a character like Elektra, who's not going to be using guns. She's going to be using Sai. Her hand is even posed in a position to hold a sai. For even further reference, we can see, if I can get her hand to wrap around it correctly, as they have very odd angles for this, but that's because for anyone who's actually ever held a sai, the angles are really odd to do just that. After a little bit of fidgeting with it, we can get her to hold the sai in actually a very natural pose for using this weapon. So I will give Hasbro credit on that. They did give great detailing in how they were going to let her hold her weapon of choice, making it very detailed in how they do so. And so that she doesn't get washed out by the background, we've got her against my black shirt here. As for her waist, that's as far back as she's going to go for you, and that's as far forward. Once again, there's no ab crunch on female figures for whatever reason. There's only an ab swivel, which means she can go to the side, which I suppose can make for some interesting posing, but it's not 100% for me. This figure does not have a waist swivel at all. It is a solid piece between her shirt and her pants. So there's not going to be any swivel cut here. Again, seems like a bit of an oversight on Hasbro's part. For her leg articulation, I know Retro will make all kinds of comments about Elektra being able to do the splits this much, but yes, she can do the splits quite well. She has some of the best leg articulation that we've seen. Retro is not a big fan of Elektra's character. She does have the thigh cut here. Of course, she has the double jointed knee, and actually can go pretty much perfect with it. Even with her calves and her thighs, she's going almost 100% back. That's very impressive. She does, of course, have these standard rocker ankles, as we see here and here. The forward motion on the ankle can only go to about there, but the backward, she can go almost on point. It is limited slightly by some of the molding around the bottom of the pant here. If you can see, the wrinkles in the pants there actually cut a little bit into her foot articulation. As a figure goes, she's alright. I'm not going to say that she's wonderful. The best thing I will say about this figure, and actually about pretty much all of the figures that we're going to be reviewing today, is that Hasbro has come leaps and bounds further with their face scanning technology. And I rather love that. That when you put the unmasked head on, she looks pretty much just like the actress that plays Elektra on the show. That's incredibly impressive to me, that they got her likeness so down pat with their new facial scan technology. That's wonderful to me. I very much appreciate what they've done there. I would greatly appreciate it if they would do a little bit more on the articulation side of our female figures, as someone like this really deserves to have a action figure that can be as dynamic as she was in her fight scenes. Moving on. Our next figure on the docket, before we really dive into our Defenders territory, is still part of the Netflix series, but he's not quite a Defender. The next figure up on the docket is John Barenthal's version of the Punisher, Frank Castle. First introduced in Daredevil Season 2, he also has his own standalone show now on Netflix. So we've got good things coming from the Barenthal version of the character. Once again, we've got the window frame on the front, the panel on the back. Inside of the case, we have pretty much just what you'd expect to see. We once again have the skyline in the background, showing these characters being very much street-level heroes on the ground floor of New York. Inside the case itself, we have 2 guns for the Punisher, which I personally would have expected more out of that. The Punisher is known very much so for his love of firearms. Only giving him a pistol and a M16 seems kind of like they cheaped out on him. Additionally, I am attempting to look around on the figure to see if there is, and I do not see. They gave us what appears to be a 9mm, but no holster for it. The Punisher is a man who very much enjoys his holsters, as he very much enjoys his guns. And he has plenty of them. Now, moving on to the figure itself. The jacket on the Punisher is a very soft, pliable plastic. It's almost a rubber feel to it. Because of this, if you so choose to, as I am so choosing to right now, the jacket can be removed if you're looking for a non-jacketed version of the Punisher. And actually, we'll get into some of the detailing that jacket was covering up in just a moment. Once again, the big thing for me is going to be the face sculpt here. Walking Dead fans and Punisher fans, along with Daredevil fans, will instantly recognize this as being John Barenthal. It even has that slight break in his nose right here, which is great detailing. Not only does it have some markings as though he's been in a pretty mean scuffle, but he has that odd break in the nose here that we see the actor actually have, which is very amazing for them to have in such a unique face sculpt. They really put a lot of detail into this, and I appreciate that. Retro, as a big fan of The Walking Dead, you know exactly what John Barenthal's face looks like. And you know that he's got that bump right here in his nose, which, if you look very close on the figure, he even has on the figure's nose. That's detail. That's detailed to me. Getting into the articulation of the figure. He has a decent range down, and his range going up is actually perfect. He can look to an almost unnatural degree upward. That's impressive. For his arm articulation, we're getting right to about the 90-degree point. Now, some of the sculpting on the arms to make it look as though it's the kinked up leather of the jacket does make it so that his articulation is a little bit limited. That being said, he does still have the bicep swivel that we see on most of our male characters, but he only has single jointed elbows. He can only go that far. For a character like the Punisher, who's going to be wielding massive guns, usually with 2 hands, you'd expect him to make it so that he could actually wield those guns with both hands. Additionally, we of course have the wrist swivel, as we see normally, and the in-out motion of the wrist. He does not have the up and down break, as we see seldom on figures, although it seems like his wrist doesn't even want to do the in and out for me today. Those are locked up pretty tight. And I'm not going to attempt to pretty much break them on stream, because that would be awful. This figure does not have an ab crunch, but he does have an ab swivel. A little bit odd. Most male characters have the ab crunch, but he's got this much backward articulation and this much forward articulation. If you look closely in the sculpt of the figure, that's not just a plain black shirt with a skull painted on it. If my camera will focus for me. Hold on one moment, guys. We're going to try and... Oh, never mind. It does want to... Hang on one moment, guys. I'll be right back. We've returned, because I am through with this camera not wanting to focus. We have a backing board to make sure that it focuses perfectly in on our figure. Now, as you can see in the detailing, they sculpted the entirety of that vest of his. You can see sculpted places for bullets, along with sculpted pouches. And the armor that the skull is on is even sculpted. Additionally, upon taking off the jacket, they did back sculpting of this vest as well. That's incredible detail work. And something I would not have expected from them. Now then. This figure also does have a waist swivel. So you can get some motion out of there. For his hips, it's not awful. It's a decent amount of hip articulation for a character who's very tactical. He's not going to be doing your acrobatic moves like Daredevil or Elektra. He's instead going to be doing your more tactical, purposeful moves. He also has, of course, the thigh swivel. He does have the double-jointed knees, which actually have a great deal of motion to them for someone with such thick thighs and thick calves. Additionally, if you see closely here, if you look closely at the sculpt of his leg, it is the type of pants that he's wearing that are making it so that he can't quite go that extra couple of degrees because of the bunching of the fabric that they've detailed in there. Now, amazingly enough, it looks like this figure does not have a boot cut, which is odd as he's wearing actual boots. When you have the opportunity to hide a boot cut in your sculpt, please do. He does have the rocker ankles, of course, as we see here. Along with, pretty abysmal forward motion, but to be fair, if you've ever worn boots like this, you know that's pretty much as far forward as you're going to get. As for his backward motion, I've never gotten quite on point with combat boots. I know, I wear them every day. Speaking of, that is an incredible detail that they wouldn't do on most other figures. If you look at the bottom of his combat boot, come on now. My apologies, guys. Sometimes my camera does not like to focus. They even sculpted in the treads at the bottom of the combat boot. That's detail. That's an insane amount of detail. Something that they do not do on other figures. Nothing like that on Elektra, who has just very plain shoes on. No, for this figure, they sculpted the bottom of his combat boots. That is a level of detail I was not expecting. The guns that he comes with are passable. At least they're real-world guns and not some weird sci-fi thing, as they've been doing with many of the characters that are armed that they've been putting out, including Spider-Man Noir, a favorite of mine who uses revolvers, not weird laser guns. That being said, Frank can hold his guns fairly well. He does have trigger fingers on each of his hands, so thankfully he does hold his armaments quite well, and he looks natural doing it. Though I am disappointed at the lack of a Hulkster for this 9mm here. It wouldn't have been that much extra plastic to just throw a Hulkster on there for him. That being said, I've got to say, I very much enjoy this figure. I like the detailing they've done. I like the sculpt work that they've done. He looks like John Barenthal. I am very impressed with what Hasbro's been doing with their facial printing technologies that they've come up with in the past few years, and they've really been exploring. I love what they've been doing with it. Now, to get started on our Defenders. We've already gone over some of the secondary characters, but let's get to the first person to have a Netflix series, Daredevil. As you can see, once again, we've got the window pane front, the portrait on the back. Inside of here, of course, aside from all of the Build-A-Figure pieces, which have already been used, I've had that figure of Man-Thing up for some time now. Inside of here, we have, once again, that city deco on the background, but inside the packaging, we have Daredevil, as played by Charlie Cox, an extra set of hands, and his 2 billy clubs. Now, fans will of course recognize that this is the suit that he wore at the very end of the first season, not even the one that he wore at the beginning of the second season. Which is just fine by me. For the figure. Now, for most of the other figures, they're going to be unmasked, with the exception of Daredevil here. Daredevil only has the masked face. The lower half of his face does look quite some bit like Charlie Cox. That being said, the San Diego Comic-Con Defenders series, if my camera will want to focus. Of course it doesn't. The San Diego Comic-Con exclusive box set of the Defenders that was recently released not only included this head here that had the mask on, but also an unmasked Charlie Cox head. If you're a big fan of Daredevil as I am, of course this was something that stuck out to you probably already, but I could not get to San Diego Comic-Con. However, that being said, most of the figures seen today are available in a box set from San Diego Comic-Con, which is available right now on Hasbro's website. I can give links to that later on to anyone that so wishes. I will link that on my Twitter after the stream today. For the figure himself, that is all the arm articulation we're getting out of him. And that is tough to do. Most of that's due to the sculpting in his shoulders up here, which, if you can see, have a great deal of sculpt. To make those lines really dramatic. That being said, it also limits his articulation. For a acrobatic brawler like Daredevil, you'd have thought that'd have given him a little bit more articulation, possibly even butterfly shoulders, but they did not. For his head articulation, Daredevil is able to look down on the city that he protects and look up decently well for forgiveness. Now, this figure does have the double-jointed elbows, but as you can see, that's as far as he can go with them because of the sculpting of his gauntlets here. He can only go to about here which is saying something for a, again, acrobatic brawler who should be able to give us a little bit more flex out of those arms. His articulation for his hands is unfortunately the in and out articulation instead of the up and down that we've seen a couple times on certain figures that use more melee-based weapons such as Thor. That's a little bit unfortunate, as someone like Daredevil would have really benefited from that up and down articulation rather than the in and out. It seems as though just trying to get his arms up to that 90 degrees has actually caused some flash to come off of his shoulders on both sides. So that is something to take note of. Now, for his waist, we do have an ab crunch here. That's as far forward as we're going on this figure. And that is as far back as he can go. He doesn't have a great deal of motion. Again, a little unfortunate for a figure like Daredevil, character like Daredevil. He does, of course, have the waist swivel. Speaking of Hulksters, unlike John Barenthal's Punisher, he does have a Hulkster for his 2 billy clubs, which we can even put into here once we finish the review. And I will say they fit in rather nicely. Really adds to the character and really makes him feel as though it's the character that we're used to seeing on the small screen, as Daredevil is only a Netflix exclusive at the moment. Hopefully we'll get him to show up in something like the next Avengers, but I somewhat doubt it. For his hips. Now, his hips are being impeded a little bit on this side by those billy clubs. That being said, they're not being impeded that much. That's as much as we're getting out of him. Pretty decent hip articulation, I must say. He also does have, of course, the thigh cut, as seen here. He does have the double-jointed knees. Unfortunately, his boots are a little bit too sculpted to make it so that he can go all the way back. His calves are just a little bit too thick, ladies and gentlemen. He cannot go all the way back. Again, unfortunate for a character such as Daredevil. For his feet, we of course have these standard rocker ankles, although these seem to go a great deal in and out, as seen here and here, like to a painful degree. Going forward, that's all the forward motion you're getting out of these boots of his, and that's all the backward. Now, another bit of great detailing, much like on the Punisher, they've actually detailed the sculpt of the shoelaces on the top of his feet. If my camera will focus. If you see there, they've actually sculpted in the tops of his shoelaces, and they've done a light bit of sculpting on the bottom of his boot. Now, he doesn't have nearly as much sculpting as the Punisher did. Funny enough, I actually recognize the pattern on the bottom of the Punisher's boots, as I have those same boots. So, kudos to you, Hasbro, for the Punisher's boots. Daredevil can be a little bit of a hit or a miss. While I do enjoy the character, while I do like that they've done certain things with his Netflix costume here, there are other pieces, such as, if you look closely, there's a little bit of fabric here, keeping him from going all the way back with his back crunch, or with his ab crunch. So there are some details that I really wish they'd have rethought before making this figure. Now, as he does have the billy club as well, I will admit they've done a great job of sculpting this. Of course, as they've done with many of the billy clubs in the past, it can be connected by a piece within the center, There we are. And if we can get a little bit more focus, you can see that there's actually sculpted lines along the ends, both front and back, of the billy club. Both where it connects in the center and where the end caps are. That's great detail work. I will give them massive credit for that. Of course, the billy clubs themselves can fit individually into Daredevil's hands for him to strike a fighting pose with. Now, the problem is with the limited articulation that we have, and not having those in and out joints in the wrist that I was talking about, his articulation is going to suffer for those fighting poses. I very much enjoy the emotes there, Retro. That brings a smile to my face. The next defender on the docket is Jessica Jones. Those of us that are fans of her will remember that she has her own series and is also one of the defenders. She's also been featured in Luke Cage. On the front, we've got the window pane. On the back, of course, we've got that portrait. This figure did not come with a lot of accessories. I will be the first to admit that. In fact, she barely even comes with things that are very signature to her outfit. In the packaging, of course, we've got that cityscape background once again. And Jessica. Now, we did have the Man-Thing Build-to-Figure piece here, but that's it. No alternate hands, no alternate head. We don't even have a scarf for Jessica, which is a little bit of an oversight, as Jessica Jones is known for having that gray scarf that she wears around, to the point where Daredevil even uses it at one point for a makeshift mask during the Defenders. To miss out on that key detail is just kind of lazy, Hasbro. Now, I don't have high hopes for articulation on this figure, as I can already see that it valued sculpt over articulation. But that's alright, as Jessica is not a, she's not really going to be an acrobatic brawler. She's going to be more so just a straight-up brawler. She's your power guy. And yes, Kristen Ritter, though. And, once again, with the face sculpt technology that they've had for the past few years, it looks rather much like Kristen Ritter. I will give them great props to that. The face sculpt technology that they've been using has really been making it look like the actors and actresses portraying the characters. We'll see more of that a little bit later. For the articulation on the figure, that's as far as she's going to look down. That's it. That's as much as she can look down on those that have scorned her. As for looking up, yeah, she's not one for high hopes, so she's not one to really look up at life. For her arm articulation, we actually do get the best articulation we've seen today, with over 90 degrees for both of her arms. She would do great in your Village People group as the Y in the YMCA. Once again, we've got the same problem we do with every female figure put out by Hasbro. Single jointed elbows, and in this case they're even worse because of the sculpting of the leather jacket, which, if you look closely, they've sculpted in the wrinkles of the leather jacket. If my camera will focus. There we are. They've sculpted in the wrinkles of the leather jacket, however, that also makes it so that her arm articulation greatly suffers because of it. For her hands, they only have the in and out articulation, and she does not have an extra set of open hands or even grasping hands. This puts a damper on my day, as I really wanted to give her a tiny bottle of Jack Daniels, probably the most notable accessory of Jessica Jones, alcohol. Now, the jacket that she has on is soft goods. It is a very soft rubber. It is greatly detailed to look just like her jacket in the show, which I will give them credit for. They did great detailing there. That being said, just because your jacket is detailed does not give you reason to make it that the arms lack articulation. Now, taking off the soft goods jacket, we can see that they've actually done some sculpting of the shirt here. And she'll be happy with whatever kind of alcohol, except she can't, she has closed fists. She can't hold a bottle of booze. There's no way for her to grab a bottle by the neck and start drinking away, as we've seen so many times in her shows. We do not have a ab crunch on the figure, nor do we have a waist swivel of any kind. Again, a little bit of an oversight on Hasbro's part. We do have the ab swivel, which is a little bit unusual. That is all for forward articulation, and that is all for backward articulation. And that is all that we've got. Oh, yeah, a regular size one would be fine too, I suppose. I'm pretty sure she'd be twice as happy with it. For her thigh articulation. Wow! Retro, I know you're going to want to make a comment about this, but Jessica can almost completely do the splits. Have her sit on top of the bottle and call it a day. That could work. This figure of Jessica Jones can almost completely do the splits. Now that is something to be said. She also does, of course, have the thigh cut. She does have the double jointed knees, which were a little bit stiff, but can go a decent degree backward. Which works for her fighting style, where she is just as likely to punch you in the face as she is to jump on you and knee you repeatedly. So that does work. It works for me. She does not have a boot cut of any sort, and the bits for the top of her boots are once again, as we've seen a couple of times now, completely separate from the rest of her foot. She does have, of course, the rocker ankles. Alright, Retro, I'll be seeing you soon. She has the forward articulation on her ankle, and that actually goes a decent degree forward. Going back, she can go on point, almost completely. That makes me happy. At least when the pieces for her boots are moved out of the way. When they're in the way, not so much, but at least since they are movable pieces, you can get them out of the way to do some posing. Speaking of those boots, once again they did some great detail work. If you look closely at the side of the boot, if the camera will focus ever, and of course my camera's not going to focus when I want it to. Never. Did for half a second there. There we are. You actually see the lacing on the side of that boot piece there. There we are. Going up the sides of the outside of the boots, much like her boots do in the show. That is something to say. That is some great detail work. I only wish that they worked a little bit better on the technology for her articulation, along with giving us some additional hands, preferably some open hands. And that scarf would have been a great thing to add in. She's a pretty basic figure, since this is all that you're getting, but if you're a big Defenders fan, and you want to complete it, and you don't want the comic book look of Jewel, you'd much prefer the real-life gritty version of Jessica Jones, and this is the version for you. Now, to complete our Defenders, the whole reason why I'm even doing this stream today is because of the Walmart exclusive 2-pack of Luke Cage and Claire Temple. Now, as you see over here, this is only available at Walmart. And minus the horrific glare I seem to have, you can see at the front has the window pane of Luke and Claire. The back, of course, has the portrait of Luke and Claire on it. So, let's get in here and see exactly what we've got. Now, I am a big fan of Luke Cage, and the fact that this is the first Marvel Legend we've gotten of him since the Modok series is just... it's a disservice to him, in my opinion. We have not gotten any Power Man figures in ages, nor have we gotten a Luke Cage figure in the longest time. Inside of the packaging, if the packaging wants to cooperate with us, we once again have that cityscape deco, although it's a slightly different cityscape this time around. A little bit interesting there. The previous 4 have all had the same cityscape. These ones have a very different one. Inside of the packaging, we have exactly what you saw. We have Luke Cage just being Luke. We've got Claire Temple, her purse, and 2 extra sets of hands for Claire. We'll get into all that in just a moment. First things first, let's complete our Defenders, or as complete as they can be at the moment. With Luke Cage. First off, we have our Luke Cage figure here, which I'm definitely liking. Everything about him is great in detail. I love the face sculpt they did for Mike Colter. It looks pretty accurate to the actor. It doesn't have an overly stocky body as they've done on some versions of Luke Cage. He looks like a normal guy that just happens to be bulletproof. The only accessory that Luke comes with is his watch. That's it. You're not going to get anything else, but you're not going to think of Luke Cage as one to really accessorize. That being said, it would have been nice to have an open hand, just any kind of hand like this, one of those claw-type hands, so that he could like grab onto someone before he punches them from here to the other side of Harlem. Now, in the figure's articulation, for our neck articulation, Luke can look to the heavens in appreciation, and can look down on those fools that he just beat the ever-living snot out of. I must say, sweet Christmas, I love the figure. I love what they've done with him. Everything about this is already feeling great in hand. The only negative I'd say is the chest piece feels very hollow. Feels like the same type of plastic that they made that Iceman out of that always had the chest cave in. So be aware of that when you're posing. For his arm articulation. Wow! We do get better than 90 degrees. He's got some great arm articulation to him, even with the sculpting, which I'm rather impressed with. I'm not impressed with this odd piece of flesh that is coming out of his shoulder as I'm posing the figure. That was an odd bit of plastic flesh that just came out of nowhere. more likely than not part of the mold that they just did not properly remove. I do love that the music changed that while we're reviewing Luke. It seems just appropriate. Now, I was mentioning the sculpt on his shirt, which if you look closely, they've added wrinkles to. There are wrinkles on both his sleeves and on the shirt itself. That's impressive. That's a great amount of detail to put into this figure. If you're not going to give him any accessories, then make sure that his sculpt is on point, and they did. In addition to his arms going above the 90-degree point, he does have the bicep swivel and the double-jointed elbows, which he can actually get pretty far. I was not expecting him to have this much articulation in his elbow just based on the size of his biceps, which put mine to shame. His forearms are also significant. I mean, that is a big forearm on a very large man. Additionally, he does, of course, have the in and out joints on his wrists, even though his wrist joint popped out as I was attempting to pose it. So there is that. For his ab articulation, he does have an ab crunch. That is as far back as he's getting. He's not bending over backwards for you anytime, ladies. And his crunches could definitely use some work. That's as far forward as we're going to go. Now, he does have a waist swivel, of course. For his legs, that's as far as he's going to go. His hip articulation isn't going to give you much more than this. It's not quite as good as Jessica's was, nor as Elektra's, but it is some decent waist, or hip articulation, rather. He, of course, has the thigh cut. His jeans actually have a textured feel to them. As I'm manipulating the figure right now, his jeans have a textured feel, and they even have some sculpting that I'll show you a close-up of later that really impresses me. They've sculpted the stitching along the sides here and on the back pockets. That's a great amount of detail for a figure that not everyone's going to even get. For his double-jointed knees, that's as far back as you're going. It's not fantastic, mostly because of the size of his calves. I would say it's partially due to the sculpting, but his sculpt actually seems to be very out of the way of that. It's more so just the size of the calves. He once again does not have any sort of boot cut, which has been a running theme of all of these Netflix figures, that not one of them has had a boot cut yet. For his rocker ankles, that is all the range of motion you're getting outward, and inward, that's it as well. That's all you're going to get, and that is due to the sculpt of the bottom of his jeans. Going forward, that's all of the forward motion you're going to get, and going back, same. That's not very impressive as far as the articulation goes. As far as the sculpt goes, that's a different story. As once again, they have made sure to sculpt, if it will show on my camera. Come now. There we are. Even for a brief moment. They've sculpted his shoelaces on the character, and they've sculpted part of the soles of his shoes. Just the outer bits, though, not the inner bits as they did with the Punisher. It's a little surprising. Both Daredevil and Luke have the sculpt on the outside of the boot, but nothing in the middle. The Punisher has that sculpt in the middle, which really takes him to the next level for me. That being said, I love everything about this Luke Cage figure. I do. I don't know what other accessories you could give Luke. beyond just being massive and powerful. The watch is a nice touch, but the detailing that they've done both on the bottom of these jeans, on the stitching on the jeans, and on the tops of the boots is just so incredible. I have to give them credit for that much detail in their sculpt. Next up, and the last of our official Netflix defenders, is Claire Temple. Now, Claire here not only has the figure of Claire herself, but 2 extra sets of hands, which we've seen her use before in the series. And, of course, her handbag, which has been a notable point in the series a few times. So, let's get started, shall we? First things first, we have, of course, the Claire Temple figure herself. Now, my only minor beef to start with is that it doesn't look exactly like Rosario Dawson. As I am a big Rosario Dawson fan, she's been funny, she's been dramatic. I really wish they would have given her slightly better attention with the face sculpt, or done more so the face printing like they did with the others. I'm not sure if they did the face printing with her, but it doesn't look like Rosario Dawson to me. She's just missing certain things that Rosario Dawson has in her face. So that's my minor point of disappointment to begin with. For her head articulation, her hair does impede a little bit, but she does have some downward articulation, as well as a bit of upward articulation. It's a little bit better than Jessica's, but it's not fantastic. For her arms, we're not even getting to 90 degrees. That's a little unfortunate. Claire's not much of a fighter, but you'd have expected them to do a little bit better than 90 degrees. Single jointed elbows, once again, the bane of all of the female figures that we've seen pretty much ever. Single jointed elbows. Why, Hasbro? You can do it for the males, you can do it for the females. I promise you, it will work. After all, that's not a natural position for an elbow. We can do double jointed, I promise you. And people will be very appreciative when you do, Hasbro. She's only getting to 90 degrees with the single jointed elbow. Her hand articulation does go in 90 degrees and out, additionally, 90 degrees. That should be the same on all of the hands, though we will examine that because we do have 2 extra pairs of hands. She once again lacks a ab crunch. She only has the ab swivel, which is incredibly tight on her. Doesn't want to move at all. That is all that I'm getting out of her forward, and that's all I'm getting out of her backward. Beyond that, it feels like the figure would break if I attempted to even turn it. I'm encountering a great amount of resistance there, and since this is the only way to get to this figure is through this exclusive 2-pack through Walmart that is incredibly rare, I'm not one to try and risk her just to see how far I can go with the articulation. She does not have a waist swivel at all. Again, a little bit of an oversight. The shirt and the pants are all part of the same sculpt. For the hips, that's as far as she's getting. That's it. Ouch. That is some Typhoid Mary type articulation. That is abysmal. Hasbro, she's not even wearing jeans. She's wearing yoga pants. You can do better. She does have the thigh cut. And, of course, the double jointed knee. That's as far as the knee's going even after trying to kind of force it up here, it pops back to here, and I'm not 100% sure why. I'd say it's to do with the sculpt of her thighs and calves, but it just seems like some oversight of not sculpting out a little bit on the back of the knee to make it so that she could bend her knee more so this way than just here. Additionally, she does not have a boot cut at all. That seems to be the common theme of every Netflix figure that we've seen, is that none of them have boot cuts. For her ankles. Ooh. Does she not? Does she not have rocker ankles? No, she does. They're just incredibly taut. That's all the articulation you're getting out of these rocker ankles on her, though. It's not a great deal. It's a little bit disappointing for a figure that I was really looking forward to, because I'm a big fan of not only Rosario Dawson, but the Claire Temple character, who has been the running theme throughout every one of our Netflix series. Of course, this is only through the Defenders. I cannot speak after the Defenders, as I haven't watched them yet. I'll be honest, I will confess, I have not yet seen Punisher, nor Season 2 of Jessica Jones, nor Season 2 of Luke Cage, but they are on my docket of things to watch. For her ankle articulation going forward, that's it. And going back, she goes about halfway to point. Her flats are getting in the way, which is amazing because they're flats. If they were boots, I could understand. These are flats. That's a little bit disappointing, Hasbro. Now, of course, she does have her handbag, which can be just slipped kind of around the figure. And should lay under the hair. If I can get the hair out of the way enough for it to lay under the hair. There we are. That way she has her trusty handbag that usually has a set of surgical gloves within it, which is the first set of alternate hands that we're going to be examining on our figure here. Because Claire Temple, for those of us who oft forget who she is the nurse who has before saved the lives of multiple Defenders characters. Thus, it's only appropriate that she has a set of sterile gloves that comes with her as an accessory, so that she can try and operate on both Luke and on Daredevil to save their lives. The other set of hands that we've got, now I really do enjoy this set of rubber gloved hands. I think that's going to be the set I'm going to display her with most often, as that's how she's best known. Now, the additional set of hands after that comes from, as many people have forgotten why she has Wolverine claws. She does not. She has a set of martial arts weapons from the trials of the Iron Fist in the Iron Fist show. If my camera will focus, please. Please and thank you, sir. Of course it's not going to focus on it for me. But, she has the claws that we see during the trials of the Iron Fist, when she and Colleen were helping out with Danny's trials against the Hand. It is a very neat throwback to that scene. However, we don't really see her with these claws beyond that. I know that we've seen her use them once or twice before, but they're not something that I know her for. I know her more so for these surgical glove hands, and will probably be displaying her with the surgical glove hands above all else. Or possibly a surgical glove and a normal hand. Now, for the actual Netflix series figures, that's it. We've gotten a grand total of 6 outside of the San Diego Comic-Con 5-pack, which had a version of Jessica without the jacket, with bare arms, had a version of Luke with a red shirt on, had a version of Daredevil with an unmasked head, as well as the masked head, and the other 2 figures were of Colleen Wing in her all-white tracksuit outfit, and of Danny Rand with his fro and one glowing fist, and one straight fist, so he could do this maneuver. But it did not include any figures for Elektra, nor Claire, nor, of course, for Frank Castle. As it stands, that's the only set where you can get both Colleen Wing and a Netflix version of the Iron Fist. That being said, if you're not okay with that, and say, I'm not going to spend $125 on those 5 figures, then I do have some suggestions for you for figures you can pose your characters with. The first of them being from the Thanos Build-A-Figure line, Hellcat. Now, many of you out there won't recognize the character of Hellcat and say, why in the world would you pose this character, this figure, with the Defenders? And the reason is because that's Patsy Walker. Fans of the Jessica Jones show on Netflix will remember Patsy Walker. She's Patsy, really want to be your friend. Yeah, that one. The news anchor lady is actually her own superheroine, as seen here in Hellcat. She has a set of billy clubs just like Daredevil does. Has, of course, her flowing red locks, which come out from underneath her mask, and is a martial arts style fighter, as we've seen her practicing martial arts many a time in the Jessica Jones show. So, if you wanted someone to have pal around with your Jessica Jones figure, a Hellcat figure could definitely be a great part of your collection. Additionally, if you wish to complete your Defenders, my recommendation is the Dormammu Wave Build-A-Figure Iron Fist. This version of Iron Fist has his traditional comic book costume. It also has a set of hands that are just in hand wraps, along with 2 glowing fists, 1 set of glowing fists, and 2 fireballs to go along with those glowing fists. If you wanted to have a complete Defenders setup for the 4 main ones that we see in the Netflix show, as it stands, unless you're willing to pay $125 for that additional figure, or that additional set of figures, rather, from San Diego Comic-Con, then the only way that you're getting them is through putting them together partially from the comics and partially from the shows. Now, we have seen that Danny is going to be rocking his headgear in Season 2 of Iron Fist, which I believe is already out. I really need to catch up on these. So if you wanted to try and make your own Danny Rand figure, that might be the first step to doing a Season 2 Iron Fist Danny Rand. Now, I do have one final suggestion of a figure to display with all of these. I'll be right back with that figure in hand for you. Hold on one moment. Alright, and we are back. Now, as it stands, this final character I have from a number of years ago. It's a very hard to find figure that won't be easy to come by, and will cost you a pretty penny. Unless, of course, you're willing to wait for the upcoming build-to-figure of him. The final person that you could display your defenders going up against is Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin. Now, this particular Kingpin that I have is from the ToyBiz Face-Off 2-pack against an unmasked Daredevil. That's the only way to get him in the black suit. There is a white-suited version with a masked Daredevil, but that wasn't for me. I actually much prefer him in the rare Chase version black suit. I just think it looks more character appropriate. If you're looking for someone for the defenders to go up against, then Kingpin, most especially this version, is a great option for you. Otherwise, if you're willing to wait, they do have a build-to-figure of the Kingpin coming out. It should be coming out next year in 2019. Now, this version will be the white suit version of the Kingpin. It will come with a cane, much like the one for this figure. I just couldn't find it in the moment or so that I had to grab this figure, just to show you guys my suggestions for who to pose with. But it will have the white suit body, a cane with a big white diamond on it, two heads, one snarling, one just very stoic version of his face. And there's also an alternate head that's coming with the legendary writer for Professor Charles Xavier to make him into the Shadow King. So for me, already having my Wilson Fisk figure that I'm a big fan of, I'm more so going to say that I'm alright there and just go with displaying him as the Shadow King over displaying him as Wilson Fisk. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen, for today. For today's review, we've had our 6 total Netflix figures and 3 suggestions of figures you could display alongside of your Netflix figures that go in the Netflix universe, but we don't have Netflix figures of just yet. We don't have anything that looks along the lines of Vincent D'Onofrio yet for the Kingpin. We don't have the actress for Patsy Walker having a figure yet. There has been a Nuke figure that was released some time ago, but he does not look like Patsy's boyfriend from Season 1 of Jessica Jones. And for the Purple Man, unfortunately, the closest you're going to get is getting, well, you can call him the Purple Man, you can call him Kilgrave, whatever you prefer. The closest you're going to get for that is getting a figure of Doctor Who from when David Tennant was Doctor Who, and displaying that along with your Jessica Jones for her to go with him. So, that is all that we have for today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining in. I hope you enjoyed our stream today. We're going to do a quick photo shoot with some of these, give you an idea of what they look like together, give you kind of our Defenders team lineup, if you will. If you've got any suggestions for what you'd like to see in future episodes, if you've got anything you'd like to see for our review next week, if you want to see some older figures, if you want to see some newer figures, if you want to see some exclusive figures, some 2-packs that are out there, if you'd like to see some of my build-to-figures, because, good heavens, I have too many of them, let us know. Throw us a link on, or throw us a mention on Twitter. Just throw us something on Twitter, or at Retro's Discord, which is Retro's Place in Outer Space. You can even throw Retro Vixen a note at her Twitter, Retro Space Vixen. Not Retro and then Space and then Vixen, but the words Retro Space Vixen. on Twitter and let her know, let me know, what do you guys want to see in future episodes. I'm more than happy to do these unboxings, and good heavens knows, I have enough figures to do these from now until the end of time. Please let us know in the comments, let us know in the chat, let us know on Twitter, let us know on Discord, what do you want to see? What future unboxings do you want to see from us? And we'll try and do whatever we can to make those happen. Thank you very much for coming in, guys. I hope you enjoyed the stream as much as I enjoyed reviewing the figures. Have a great day. Keep it nerdy.